According to the Holy Word in the Apostle Paul's second letter to his disciple Timothy, chapter 4, verse 1, I charge thee therefore before God and the Lord Jesus Christ, who shall judge the quick and the dead at his appearing and his kingdom. And in any lawsuit brought into a civil court, persons who believe that they have suffered some wrong bring pleadings and complaint to a court, as the students of Washington Lee High School have done, as well as one former candidate for the Arlington Public School Board. And as in science, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction in a court of law. Opposing parties named as defendants find cause to answer these averments more often than not in denial of all wrong. Such was the case in the Arlington Public Schools in the year 2000. In Carter v. Arlington Public School System 82F sub 2nd 561, which was brought to the Federal District Court in Alexandria by an African American art teacher who alleged discrimination against himself, but only after his Caucasian supervisor demanded that he seek mental help. His case was dismissed in court. Such was the case in the year 1950 in Carter v. School Board of Arlington, 182 F. 2nd 531, brought into the Fourth Circuit Court 4 years before Brown v. Board of Education was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court, and 9 years before the Arlington Public School Board, proceeding with all deliberate speed, relented to the will of the nation's highest court to that landmark desegregation decree. And according to our revisionist history, without any reported incident. The opening lines of that forgotten case are revealing. The court wrote, "This case again brings to our attention the right of Negro students in state schools to the same or substantially equivalent privileges of education as white students. The difficulties inherent in the practice of segregation are again emphasized. The schools in question are high schools located in Arlington County, Virginia, where the Negroes of school age constitute only a small percentage of the school population, so that the expense involved in affording to the small minority in a separate school every course of study and every kind of equipment and recreational facility that are given the majority is proportionately very great. Washington Lee High School for white students is predominantly a senior high school with a total of 2,377 students, of which 1,881 are in the senior and 496 in the junior high school. Hoffman-Boston High School for Negro students is predominantly an elementary junior high school with 48 senior high school pupils, 13 boys and 35 girls, and a total enrollment of 270. In 1946 to 1947 and in 1947 to 1948, high school students numbered 12 and 18, respectively, of which only 3 were boys. The burden upon the county authorities became more onerous when in recent years the schools in the District of Columbia imposed a tuition fee upon students from Arlington County and discontinued the practice of admitting Negro high school students from the county free of charge. Negro students who desired to attend Washington schools to obtain courses and facilities available to whites, but not to Negroes in Arlington County, applied to Arlington County School Board to pay their tuition. And this was done during 1946 to 1947 and 1947 to 1948 sessions. In 1948 to 1949, however, payment of tuition was refused to all Negro students except those who had completed 3 years of work in the District of Columbia schools. This was a case involving a school now entrenched in a local controversy about changing a name to erase discrimination in a town where today we are told is a community where diversity is our strength and where we boast over 150 spoken languages. But in 1950, 4 years before the landmark Brown decision, and just 5 years before we progressively evolved and decided to desegregate, only 24 black students were even attending our one high school and denied an education at a high school alleged today to have an offensive name. And the remainder of the high school-aged children of color and of an undetermined number were told to go to the colored schools across the river, where for 2 years we agreed to pay for their education until that urban public school system in a chocolate city demanded payment for the education of our colored children. But then we are told, because of the undue burden of paying for the education of less than 24 children of color, we decided that we would only pay for those who had already completed 3 years of school. So if you had a child of color already forced to be sent across the river for education, we told them. So if you had a child of color already forced to attend a high school across the Potomac River for an education, we told them that they also had to pay for the privilege because the expense of education for a handful of students of color was far too onerous, cumbersome, and inconvenient to the majority of persons who are not of color. But if we change the name today, according to the Arlington Public School Board, it will be well with our soul. And anyone who disagrees must just be a racist. As George Santayana reminded us in the Book of Reason, those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. But our educated and enlightened progressive public school board is telling the complainants of today that because they have not forgotten, well then, they must just be one of those racists. According to the Holy Word in the Apostle Paul's second letter to the church at Corinth, chapter 5 and verse 10, there shall one day be a reckoning, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that everyone may receive the things done in his body, according to that he hath done, whether it be good or bad. For whatever reason, the named defendants in the present suits brought to challenge the school board on changing the name of Washington Lee High School have selected first to deny the averments of the only African American bringing suit against them in court. They have, in their demurrers or motions to dismiss his case, like the plaintiff Carter in 1977, called him just plain crazy. But those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. They have, in their demurrers or motions to dismiss his case, like the plaintiff Carter in 1977, called him just incompetent. But those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. They have, in their demurrers or motions to dismiss his case, like the plaintiff Carter in 1977, told him that he lacked standing to even present a suit against them. But those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. They have, in their demurrers or motions to dismiss his case, like the plaintiff Carter in 1977, denied all wrongdoing. But those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it and to think his mama voted for Carter in 1976. But far worse than in 1977 and in 1948, they have at community expense retained professional services of private attorneys to defend their personal wrongs, including over 200 felonious transactions in violation of federal law sent by a masked bully to silence his dissent and who called an African American a white supremacist. For his insolence, they have demanded not only that the court dismiss his case, but also exact financial sanctions against him for bringing a frivolous lawsuit and demanded that the courts force him to request special permission in the future if he ever finds cause to bring a suit to court again. They have sent 3 attorneys from 3 different firms to attack his challenge against them, and at the expense of the community to defend their decision to spend over $1 million for a cosmetic elixir to erase over 150 years of substandard education to persons of color, and all against a man of color who only walked into a court and requested them to do the right thing, and who only asked in compensation the sum of $1. Yet they stand on sovereign immunity and deny him. But those who cannot remember the past are doomed to repeat it. According to the Holy Word in the Apostle Paul's first letter to his disciple Peter, chapter 4 at verses 1 through 8, For as much then as Christ hath suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that hath suffered in the flesh hath ceased from sin, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lusts of men, but to the will of God. For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lusts, excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries, wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you. Who shall give account to him that is ready to judge the quick and the dead? For this cause was the gospel preached also to them that are dead, that they might be judged according to men in flesh, but live according to God in the Spirit. But the end of all things is at hand. Be ye therefore sober, and watch unto prayer. And above all things, have fervent charity among yourselves, for charity shall cover the multitude of sins. In the laws of nature and of science, for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. And as in the Spirit we believe in karma, in faith we believe that there will one day come a reckoning, when we are all adjudged for the wrongs we have done and yet denied. And so be not discouraged nor disheartened, for all things are done in time. And just wait until you see his Peter. Amen. Eventually all songs merge into one, and a rhythm runs through it. The rhythm was kept by the world's greatest drum major for justice, and runs in a syncopated beat over robes from the choir rooms of time. On some of the robes are timeless teardrops. Under the robes are the songs, and some of the voices are theirs, until justice flows like waters, and righteousness like a mighty stream. We are haunted by those baptismal waters. And they all sang a hymn and went away. Non-incalculus future is the motto of Washington University, not unmindful of the future. My name is Major Mike Webb, and I am running for U.S. Congress. You can't see next year in Jerusalem, in liberty, with honor and excellence, the South shall rise again. Amen. This advertisement was authorized by Mike Webb.